let's open up in prayer, and then we're going to get right into the word right away. So, Father, we just thank you so much. We are so grateful to you that we get to be here today to spend time with one another, to learn about you and more of you, to be more like you. We thank you for the rain that you've given us the last few days. We do ask for more, so please keep it coming. We ask for safety for all those who are fighting fires in the West, especially in California. We ask for strength for all of us as we go through troubled times. And we ask for your health for this church as we continue to grow and to seek after you. We love you with all of our heart. Amen. We'll open up your Bible to Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. I'm sure it's a story you've heard before, but we're going to really dissect it today. We're really going to get into it and discover what the Lord has for us today from this. I'm going to be reading out of the New King James Version, so if you have an NIV or whatever, it's pretty close, but you'll see a few differences. On the same day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us cross over to the side." Now, this he, of course, is Jesus. If you have a red letter Bible, it says that the words are in Jesus' words. Now, when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was. Interesting saying. And the other little boats were also with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling up. But he was in the stern, asleep on a pillow, and they awoke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, "Who can this be? And even the wind and the sea obey him?" Wow, what a story. So first of all, go to the next slide if you would. I want you to know that there's also the text. If you would, please go ahead and silence your phone if you're going to be texting me today. As you guys know, in the past, I like to have text from you. I ask questions throughout the message. And if you'd like to go ahead and text me your questions or your answers, it always adds to the flavor of what we do here on Sunday morning. So you're more than welcome to do that. Oh, is it giving you fits, Zach?
Have a hammer.
All right, praise the Lord. Well, let's start with a little story. As you guys know, I've been in ministry for quite a few years, and I've served in small, medium, and large churches all over the country. Well, I happened to be serving in a very large church in Las Vegas, and I was ministering to about 1,000 kids a week, whether it was in chapels or services on Sunday, whatever. Like I said, very large church, and things are going well. I mean, we're growing like crazy. The church is expanding, and we're moving to multiple services. I think we had 5 services in a weekend because our sanctuary wasn't big enough. I mean, things are going great, but I was really struggling. In fact, to the point where I decided it'd be best if I left the church and went to a different church. So I actually started interviewing with other churches. So once I started the process, I went to the senior pastor and told him what I was doing. I've always been that way with my pastor, to let them know that, hey, listen, I'm thinking about moving on. A lot of times pastors that are associate pastors, they tend to not tell anything until the very end, and then they reveal, hey, by the way, I'm leaving. And so I didn't feel like I wanted to do that with him, so I shared with him what was going on in my life, and he said, I don't agree with your decision. And he goes, I think there's something else going on. And so he recommended me to a counselor, and the church actually paid for it. So for the next 12 to 18 months, somewhere in there, I met with a counselor once or twice a week for that time, helping me to overcome what I was going through. What I discovered was, when I had been in the smaller churches of under 500, I could, in a sense, carry the load of other people. And I felt like I was strong enough to do it. But when I started ministering to 1,000 kids a week and having to memorize 600 or 700 of those kids' names and their parents and everything that's going on in their life, became a burden. And so instead of caring for them, I began to carry them and carry their burden. So when a child would die, which happened. When a family member had cancer, which happened. When all of these tragedies happened, all the trauma happened, I was trying to carry their burden, and I realized I could not do it. And I was getting to the point of being burned out. And so I had to seek the help of a counselor who helped me through that time. It was very, very difficult, but it was needed. Basically, it saved my career as a pastor. If I hadn't done that, I'd probably gone to the other church, and within a short time, I would have been having the same issues. So the senior pastor was right. And he knew that was the best thing for me was to get that. The counselor gave me one scripture that really helped me through that time. And it's Matthew 11:28. You'll need to go there. I'm going to go ahead and read it for you. I'm going to read it out of the Message. Sometimes the Message tends to be a little flowery, but this one just seemed to speak really well to me, and this is one he gave me. It was out of the Message when he gave it to me. He says, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion?" Here was a pastor. You would think that's the last thing a pastor should be is burned out on religion, right? "Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." And that's what I needed to hear. And so from that point on, I was able to see some health. It took a long time, but within a few months, I started seeing there was hope for me at the end. I'm like, you know what, I think I can do this now. The Lord's there helping me. I've got this man who's really stepped in my life. And so here I was, struggling, but yet I knew that God was going to be helping me through this. But it took a long time. It took a lot of work. So let's go to the story here where we have this very interesting story of Jesus is on this boat. And now remember, Mark, who's writing this, is not writing it as someone who eyewitnessed what happened. He is writing it based on what he heard from Peter. So Peter's probably the one, when you hear certain questions being asked, it's probably Peter asking the question. Like when it says later on, it says, "Don't you care that we're perishing?" Can't you just see Peter saying that? Yeah, Mr. Overreaction on everything. I mean, you could see that it's Peter's words here. So Mark is trying to get this, and so he's trying to show the story from the point of view of Peter. So remember that when we're always reading this, always think about, okay, who's the one that's doing? And I love Peter because Peter is like us. Well, he's a lot like me, actually, so I kind of commiserate with him a little bit. But let's find out what's going on before the story, because sometimes it's really important to find out what happened. If you go back to chapter 4, verse 1, it says, "And he began to teach by the sea, and a great multitude was gathered to him. So he had to get into a boat and sat in it on the sea, and the whole multitude was on the land facing the sea." So throughout the day, he is teaching all of these parables, and then at one point he goes inland, goes into someone's house, and he's teaching there. So it gets towards the end of the day now, and he is exhausted. Yeah, I know that Jesus is God, but he's also human. And he was physically and emotionally spent. He was like done. I'm like, guys, we got to get out of here. And so what they did was they go back out to the boat and they get into this boat. So let's look at verse 35 through 36. First of all, this boat, sometimes we had this idea it's a little tiny boat. It wasn't super tiny, but it wasn't big either. It was probably about 25 to 30 feet long, so probably a little bit wider than the stage area up here. And it was about 8 feet wide. They could typically seat about 12 people, but probably they had 12 to 15 in this boat. So the boat is already, low slung in the water already. So it probably wasn't wise to overload the boat. I mean, anybody who's a boater knows that you're supposed to wear your life preserver and not overload your boat. Well, I think these guys had their boat overloaded a little bit, even though they were experienced fishermen. And so it says, so they got into the boat, and it says, on that day. Now it's very interesting, Mark very rarely will tell you about a time or a day in his book. His book goes from immediately Jesus did this, and immediately Jesus did this, and immediately Jesus did this throughout the whole book. In fact, in the first 5 chapters, he mentions immediately 25 times. I'm wondering if Mark was ADHD or something. But the point was that he always said Jesus was going here and here and there, and we know that it wasn't like going here to there, but that's how Mark did it. He just treated like Jesus was going 100 miles an hour all the time. But here he specifically gives a day and gives the context for why Jesus had to get into this boat and get away. Yeah, Jesus had to get away from people. What? You're kidding me, right? Jesus had to get away from people? Yeah. Sometimes we need to get away from people. I see some of you smiling. I know you guys know it's the truth. There are times we just need to get away. And that's what Jesus was doing. He was seeking solace. He was so exhausted, he had to get away and spend time with the Father. In reality, he didn't spend time with his friends too. Now, this lake is not a big lake. Now, I don't know how big Belton is. I know it's kind of weird shape and all that stuff, but the Sea of Galilee is only 13 miles long, and it's only about 7 miles across at its widest. So it's not a big lake, and where Jesus was leaving from to go to the other side, it was probably a 2-hour trip. 3-hour tour, type of thing. It was a 2-hour trip. And so it was going to be a short little trip to get over. It was probably late in the day. And almost immediately, as it's implied from the story, Jesus goes to the back of the boat and falls asleep, leaving the rest of the guys to row themselves across or to sail across the sea. As it turns out, he's going from west to east. Typically, that's the way the wind blows. That's why the trip only takes about 2 hours. And so, they get on the boat and they're looking at the weather. These guys are fishermen. They know what to look for. And, hey, it looks good. I think we can get out there. And they start sailing across. And in the middle of all this, all of a sudden something happens. But I want you to understand, I want you to see something first. It says, on the day, and as he was. And of course, if you have your Bible, it says he, in capitalized, as Jesus was. What do you mean by that? Jesus was so tired, they just kind of put him in the boat, laid him down, and let him sleep. Just let him sleep. They had to care for him because they could tell he was exhausted. He was human just like us. And then there's other little boats. The people so wanted to be around him, other little boats started following them. He couldn't get away from people even though he needed to. He couldn't get away. The people wanted to, and that's the reality, is that people want to be with Jesus. But at this point in his life, he just needed to get away for a short time. Now, this pillow, everyone has this idea that it's this nice fluffy pillow, maybe even a flotation cushion he stuck his head on. No, that's not what it's meaning. In the Greek, it refers to the seating area where they are in the back of the boat. It was probably a piece of wood. Yeah, that's a really nice pillow. Or a piece of leather at the most. Man, moving up in the world, I've got some leather to lay my head on. But the point of that is that word shows that he was so tired, he could fall asleep with his head on this hard thing. And then in the midst of the storm, he was still sleeping. Now, my father-in-law, who happens to be here today, he was in the Air Force back a long time ago, and he was in the weather. He did the weather for the Air Force. And a lot of you guys are way too young to remember this. In fact, most of you guys are way too young to remember this. But back in the day, they didn't have nice little printers, jets, the jet printers and the copy machines. They had what's called like a teletype. And this thing was loud. In fact, it was so loud, they put a box over the top of it to keep the noise down. But that still didn't keep the noise down. It was so loud when it would